Welcome to you all. And we've heard the keynotes, and I want to pick away at some of the points that were raised. But first, a very general point, which Trudy, I want you to address if you would, which is just about the potential that we should recognize in seafood. The world, population is, I think, due to rise from where it is now, 6-7 billion to 9 billion, or if not more, by 2050. We've got to feed this world population. And how significant is seafood going to be? Give us the big picture.
Thank you very much for the questions, and I will indeed answer your question from the nutrition perspective. First, the state of the global food insecurity worldwide. Very worrying fact here is that the number of people who suffer from hunger has been growing over the past 3 years, returning to levels from about a decade ago. 821 million people in the world went hungry to bed in 2017, around 1 out of every 9 people in the world. We know that food insecurity contributes to undernutrition, but also to overweight and obesity. High rates of these forms, different forms of malnutrition, coexist in many countries. Nearly 151 million children under the age of 5 are suffering from stunted growth. Worldwide, we have 672 million adults that are obese. Non-communicable diseases are the most common cause of death. The 2018 State of World Fisheries and Aquaculture highlight indeed the critical importance of fisheries and aquaculture for the food, nutrition, but also employment and livelihoods of millions of people. The last decade has seen unprecedented growth in the demand for agriculture products, including fish. Of the 171 million tons of total fish production in 2016, about 88% was utilized for direct human consumption. This report also gives projections for a significant growth in aquaculture, projected to reach 109 million tons in 2030. Aquaculture has a significant chance to expand, but growth in subarctic and Arctic waters may not be large because of the cold temperatures. In addition, maybe you have heard about the publication that was released last week by the Lancet EAT Commission on healthy diet from sustainable food systems. Aquaculture will not solve the challenges posed by nourishing the world population healthy diets, but definitely could help steer production of animal-sourced proteins towards reduced environmental effects and enhanced health benefits. So in sum, the fisheries sector is crucial in reducing food insecurity and malnutrition, but it's therefore very surprising that often fish is left out of the global discussion around food security and nutrition. Also, many countries that have developed food and nutrition policies, strategies, do not factor in the contribution of fisheries and agriculture. Talking about the world food insecurity, we should not forget the key drivers behind the recent rise in global hunger. Last year, SOFI of 2018, published by FAO and its partners, focused on the climate variability and extreme weather events. One of the key drivers behind the recent rise we see in global hunger. Actions need to be accelerated and scaled up to strengthen resilience and adaptive capacity of food systems, people's livelihoods, and nutrition in response to this climate variability and weather extremes. FAO published a technical paper on the impacts of climate change on fisheries and aquaculture and highlights the need to take mitigation and adaptation measures. Because at the end, what we would like to see is that food from sustainable aquatic ecosystems developed in an environmentally and a socially responsible manner play indeed a critical role to food security and nutrition. contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals mentioned by a previous speaker through the time frame we have been provided by the UN Decade of Action and Nutrition from 2016 to 2025.
Okay, well, thanks for giving us that overview. I mean, I guess the message is that the nutritional needs of the world are expanding massively, and fish has got to play a crucial role in that. Here, let me ask you from the point of view of the Arctic. You sit here in Norway directing the Marine Research Institute. We've heard a little bit about the changing nature of fish stocks in the Arctic as waters warm. So what's your view of the outlook for fisheries? Let's start, we're talking wild fishing at the moment, for wild fishing in the Arctic region. It was said earlier that actually in the short run there may be a bit of a sort of period of bounty as cod in particular moves northward and into this region. So is this a sort of short-term good news story?
Well, I think it has been a short-term good news story, really. If you look at the cod stock, it has profited quite a lot by the increased ice-free areas, which has increased the productivity of the Barents Sea.
Yeah.
So it peaked in 2013 at the level of the total stock similar to the unfished after the war biomasses of 4 million tons. So it's been a huge increase in the biomass, mainly due to some really strong year classes in 2004 to 6. Now it's going down naturally as the incoming year classes are smaller. But
is it being fished responsibly right now?
Yes, it is. So we harvest it so that when we reduce the stock size, you also reduce the harvest level. So not only the quota as a percentage, but the percentage that you take out is going down. So this is very well managed, I would say, based on the knowledge-based advice, management regulations, and enforcement, as Mikkel also mentioned. But I think that it's also fair to say that there will be winners and there will be losers in this change. So the species are affected very differentially. So the Arctic species are essentially shrinking their preferred habitat. So they're really seeing a combined stress from the thermal stress, that the area of their preferred habitat is shrinking, and also they're eaten by the cod. So the cod is expanding enormously into these areas, and it feeds on these Arctic species that had a refuge up there in the past that no longer exists.
So it's the era of the cod, basically.
It's the cod era,
yeah. All right, let's quickly get a view from Alaska. John, you sit on the Alaska Board of Fisheries. I went to Alaska not that long ago, and I went to Bristol Bay. And it was the time of the salmon migration, and it was extraordinary the degree to which you've now got technology to measure exactly how the through flow of salmon at any given time, and you use this high-tech equipment to tell the fishermen whether or not they're allowed to fish on any given day, and it's extraordinarily sort of sensitive and nuanced. Is that an indicator that in Alaska you think you've found the right balance between exploitation of the resource and sustainability and long-term protection of the resource?
We'd like to think we have, but
what's the evidence?
There's still drawbacks. Bristol Bay is a really good example of how things are going correctly at the time. Up above the peninsula in Alaska, the salmon fisheries haven't been affected near as much as they have on below the peninsula on the Gulf Coast in the southeast Alaska region where I come from, due to climate change. Warm water events have really reduced the runs of salmon in the Gulf Coast and the southeast portion, where up above the peninsula it's been really robust, all the way up around the top of Alaska into the Arctic.
So where you're from, it's a pretty bleak picture, is it?
It's a very bleak picture for pink salmon and king salmon, but there's still some. We do have hatchery fish that they're not farm fish, they're hatchery fish. They're eyed out and then released into the wild, and they come back to their natal streams that way.
Let's talk about different aspects of this fishing and seafood story. One of them is it's about jobs, it's about employment for people, and in this case, as we're talking about the Arctic, in the high north, and a desire to believe that this is about sustainable jobs for local people. But the more I look at the fishing industry, the more I see that its future seems to lie with bigger scale. there are fishing fleets that are run by big conglomerates now. There's a lot of money in fish, it seems. I don't know if it's true in Scotland, Mary, but in Norway, it seems a lot of the big businessmen who are running these fishing fleets are making megabucks. So the temptation is to always scale up, to build bigger companies, and you just wonder whether the trends in the fishing industry are running in the interests of the local fisherman or woman fishing communities in the isolated areas, or whether more and more of the profit is being hoovered up and sent south to Oslo or other places far from the Arctic North. Is this a problem? We'll start with you, Roy.
Oh, it's an easy question. No, I think especially the technology development is going very fast. And we get more and more knowledge about in the wild stock where the fish are, which area, which time of the year. I had some examples in my speech regarding a cooperation with Russia, because I think we have to have politicians that can say no and dare to say no. That this year we have to be strict, and we have to have strict rules. And the industry is not always happy for that, but in the long run, you see that we get results. And for me personally, it doesn't matter if we have a small owner or a big owner, as long as we have jobs in the community along the coast.
But it does matter, doesn't it? It's the nature of the jobs and where control lies. I mean, Michael earlier from Royal Greenland was saying, we have to run ourselves and think of ourselves like Unilever or Nestle. I'm not sure that necessarily is the most appealing concept for fishing communities in the more remote parts of the high north.
No, but in the end of the day, you have to have landed the fish on shore, and then you have to create jobs on shore along the coast, and that's the most important thing. And
so you don't think there is an issue of control and where the profits are ploughed and who's really making the big profits and the most from the fishing industry? You don't care about that element of control.
Yes, I do care, but
you don't sound like you do. You're just saying, look, a job's a job, and if there are jobs in
it, of course, because you have to see the it's going that way, and it's important that the jobs are created along the coast. And the investment in the industry, you said it yourself, bigger boats, more expensive equipments, new technology, and it costs money. And we have to let the industry make money, because if the industry makes money, they will invest the money in new, better technology, better science result, better boats, better equipment, and so on. So I don't think you have to say that, oh, look at him, he's making so much money, and we have to see the whole in a bigger picture.
Let's tap into the Scottish experience then. Mary, you outline, fishing is still very important to Scotland. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think there's quite the money in Scottish fishing that there is in Norwegian fishing at the moment, but I could be wrong about that. Are Scottish fishermen doing well at the moment?
Yeah, and I think it is about that balance as well. I don't see the future as being all about the bigger commercial operators, because, a massive area for us is the inshore fisheries and the sustainability of businesses like that. For example, I visited a business in Benbecula in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland just on Friday there, where there's a business which supports 30 people, which is absolutely, it's a key employer in that area. And I think one of the biggest pressures for them is the protected areas that we have, or the coastal waters around Scotland. So it's trying to make sure, that's why we're moving more towards the regional fisheries groups, to look at a more local management of those areas, to make sure that businesses like that are sustainable into the future. But I suppose a key issue for us within that is the fact that a lot of the seafood, particularly shellfish that we catch, about 80% of that is exported. So that's where the highest value is for us in that product.
But that local management principle is an interesting one. Does that apply in Norway too?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Because we almost export all the fish we can catch or harvest in the aquaculture industry. Our job is try to make the industry do more with the fish before we export it. Again, we get a higher price, more people in work, and more taxes to the finance minister.
Do you think science is really integrated well with the fishing industry? Do you think the fishing industry listens to, understands, and utilizes science in the best ways here?
I think we do. We have those 3 pillars, as I mentioned, of management. But one additional pillar is that you have a good communication with the industry, and I think that is a trustful communication with them. And I think that that's very important to have, because that goes back both ways. It increases our legitimacy if they know how we work and how we and why we have to cut quotas, and that you have to do that because the stock is you show that it goes down. So I think that we have many meetings with the industry. We talk very well with them, not always agreeing, of course. And that's so. But I think that science has an important role. And that it's well situated and institutionalized in Norway in collaboration with our partners in the Northeast Atlantic. We have very important collaboration with Russia, but also the other surrounding countries, and it's all organized scientifically in the ICES, the International Council for Exploration of
And
the
when
Sea.
you talk about Russia, interesting, politically relations quite difficult between Western nations and Russia, and the sanctions imposed post-Ukraine. But on the question of fishing cooperation and real trust and truth-telling about what's going on in fishing, you think the Russians and governments like the Norwegians have really a positive and strong relationship?
I mean, last year we celebrated here in Tromsø the 60th anniversary for our scientific cooperation. And I think that has been the basis for the fisheries and the good development of fisheries, that we agree. We have surveys that we do very integrated. We cover, for example, the Barents Sea every year with 5 vessels, the whole Barents Sea, 3 Norwegian vessels, 2 Russian. And that's very tightly integrated. We have people and meetings before and after the survey. So we have friendship in addition to being colleagues between Norway and Russia. And I think that's a very important foundation also that is important to the government, actually, and the fishing industry as well.
Okay, well, let's see in the audience whether we've got fishy questions and seafoody questions. I think we have, so let's get microphones. We've got a couple over here, and we've got one over there, so we'll get microphones to you. We'll go to that lady first.
Thank you. Considering that there's a lot of people in the world that are vegetarian and are still alive, and considering that, for example, we start talking about eating insects and animals that are lower in the chain, the nutritional chain. From a nutritional point of view, I'm not speaking about taste, but from a nutritional point of view, it's not a bit hypocritical to say that we have to fish, and even in the most pristine area in the world, to feed the population?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. Trudy, you specialize in looking at global nutrition. We don't need to eat fish, really, do we?
Well, when it comes to certain nutrition values of the fish, for instance, we know that fish has good beneficial effects for preventing cardiovascular diseases because of the omega fatty acids, essential fatty acids. So it's recommended to eat in the...
No, I know it's recommended, and we all know oily fish is supposed to be good for us, but the point is a good one. I mean, again, if in the context of a world population that is going to impose huge demands on our planet,
True.
Maybe we need to be thinking more laterally about how most efficiently to keep those people alive with adequate levels of nutrition. And maybe fishing, partly just out of pure protective instincts, but partly also out of economic efficiency, fishing isn't going to be the future for feeding
I'm
people
not
of the
saying
planet.
that fishing will be the future for feed the entire population in the world.
No, but you are suggesting
it's
it's
part
gonna,
of it.
You were suggesting that the amount of fish in our diets is going to increase, and that particularly So you are seeing an exponential rise in the importance of seafood in the global diet. This lady is suggesting why? Why do we need to think that way?
It's because of at the moment you also have a very proportional to meat consumption. And in order to get the meat consumption down, because that's really having an effect on the environment. You have to look for other animal proteins. Insects, indeed, are a possibility to include in the diet, but it is not in such a way that you can feed the population worldwide with these animal proteins. Only having vegetable or vegetarian proteins is not sufficient to feed the population either, because animal products do have essential nutrients that you do not necessarily find in the vegetables and the fruits.
Well, it's a fascinating debate. I'm going to stop it because I don't want to get too involved in that particular debate, but it is interesting for all of us to think about whether fish and seafood is going to play the very important role in the future of the world's diet that we've sort of assumed on this panel. So thanks for the question. There were a couple more. Yeah, there's a gentleman there. We'll try and squeeze two in, but we're running short of time because we've got to do a panel change. Go on, sir, quick as you can.
Hi there, thanks for the interesting presentation. So we briefly sort of discussed terms like maximum sustainable yield and sort of what our goals for fisheries management should be. On the east coast of Canada, where I'm from, there's a policy called the preservation of the inshore fleet. So we're talking about managing fisheries in such a way that we're kind of preserving local jobs, but also that independence you were describing. So I'm curious what the perspective of the members of the panel are on the role of fisheries management in preserving that independence of these communities.
Yeah, it's something we touched on, but who would like to take that on? Actually, why don't you, from the Alaska point of view, how do you best protect the traditions of fishing communities and the independent, small-scale fisher people?
That's one of the part of the things that we do when we're making regulations and policies, is to try to provide for coastal communities that seem to be shrinking, and so we're trying to help coastal communities stay involved in the fisheries. Like you said before, the big industry is gobbling up a lot.
Yeah, you don't want
small
just a
ones.
bunch of Unilevers and Nestles operating fishing off your coast.
So we try to keep the local communities involved all the way up the coast.
All right. Well, that's a theme we'll come back to in the second stage of the panel. I just want to try and get one more in, and then we're going to shift panels. But you, sir, you give us a quick one, please.
Yep. Thank you very much. When it comes to sustainable fishing, it's mostly about stock management. But there's two issues I'd like to bring up, and one is competition with marine mammals. You know, we're moving up further north, and how is the competition between the fisheries and the marine mammals going on? And the other one is that there's increasing result that there's a lot of fishing gear ending up in the Arctic. Do you take that into consideration when you talk about sustainable fisheries?
Right. Go on then, quick as you can.
I think that there are some indications that there are competition between some of the marine mammals and the cod, for example. They seem to compete for some of the same crustacean and small fish. So you've seen that some of the minkies have been decreasing their blubber thickness, and that has been interpreted as a competition from the cod, for example. The cod has gone down a little bit, so we see also that the condition have improved. But that's a real situation that you have when you have these large stocks that you have in the Barents Sea. It's a consequence of a little bit prudent management. Then you get this potential competition effect. With regards to fishing gear, it's of course an issue with the sustainability, and you would like a gear that goes away when you stop fishing. We know that gill nets especially is a problem, that you have ghost fishing problems, and every year the Directorate of Fisheries collect gill nets, and that's a big issue, and it's a problem that needs to be addressed continuously, I think, in order to have sustainable fisheries.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I'm actually, it's time to do a quick bit of choreography and a quick stage change. So can I ask three of my panelists to, and we'll give you a warm hand as you leave, but Trudy and Geir and John, thank you so much for your contributions, and we give you a very warm round of applause.